Today we're going to learn about tessellations. Tessellations were used by the artist M.C. Escher to make art, like fine art. Now, tessellations have been around for a long, long time. More often than not, they're used for decoration when making art and not as an art form. Tessellations are an arrangement of shapes that cover the picture without overlapping or without leaving empty spaces. You probably have one around you right now, like the floor. The tiles on the floor are a tessellation. They're shapes that interlock with each other, they leave no empty spaces, and they're not overlapping each other. And your tiles are probably square, so, tessellation. Now, M.C. Escher took that idea of basic shapes and he turned it into an art form that is far beyond basic shapes, squares on the tiles on the floor. M.C. Escher was a graphic artist to begin with. He specialized in woodcuts and lithographs, which are basically you're carving into something and then putting ink on that and then squishing it onto a piece of paper, and the piece of paper is the art. Right? That's what he did as his job. This is before computers. This is before, any technology of that form, electronic technology. So he made most of his art was made for magazines, newspapers, and ads. Although we call him M.C. Escher, his full name is a bit more complicated. He was born in 1898 in Holland. His father wanted him to be an architect, but his grades did not hold up for that career, especially his math grades. His math grades were very poor, which we'll find ironic as we look at his later artwork. So that's why he went into graphic arts. He was really good at drawing. In fact, I have an example here. This is a drawing he made of himself. And he really did look like that. I've seen photos of him. See, we're here in the United States, and he lived way over there in Holland. Now, he didn't actually become a famous artist until the 1950s. He was born in 1898, 1956. So he's almost 50 years old by this point. He had his first important exhibition. His work was written up in Time magazine, and suddenly everyone in the world thought, wow, this guy's awesome. Especially mathematicians, as we're going to see here in a moment. His artwork was quite spectacular. If you've never seen his work, I definitely would encourage you to go explore his work. Just typing in M.C. Escher artwork into a Google site, and you're going to see tons of stuff. We're going to focus this video on making the tessellations themselves. But he had no formal math training. I want to make that very clear. So he started out his artwork when he was inspired by a trip to Spain. He and his wife had gone on a vacation, and they traveled to Spain, and they visited this palace called Alhambra. And while there, they saw these very cool tiles on the walls. The walls and the ground were decorated with very intricately cut and arranged tiles. And he said later that this trip was one of the richest sources of inspiration that he had ever tapped. Okay, so Alhambra Palace is technically more like a city, because although it does have a palace, there's other areas, there's other buildings, and the whole thing is surrounded by a wall. It's in Granada, Spain, and it was built during the late Islamic dynasty. There for a while, Spain was actually occupied and run by an Islamic king. And he built this giant palace up on a hilltop. It's lavishly decorated. I mean, if you've ever seen a palace or thought of a palace. Well, this one's kind of unique because instead of the Western influence, it has an Eastern influence or a Middle Eastern influence. Moorish architecture is unique in that there are no representations of living beings. There's no sculptures of people. There's no decorations of animals. It's all patterns, symmetry, and non-realistic looking objects. So as we can see in this image here, these are columns, these are pillars. They're holding up the ceiling, and all of it is decorated with shapes and lines. This is the throne room. It's an outdoor space. It has, we're looking through a very big opening front door, and it has windows on the side. There's no glass in those windows, so the breeze can cool the king as he's sitting in there, probably on cushions on the ground on his throne. I say that with quotes. The lower half of it, you can see some very decorative designs. Those are all tessellations. The upper section is decorated with Arabic words and what looks to be like a throne room. You can see like a chair here, and then two on the left and right, and some kind of canopy over it. And also interesting, I wish I had a picture of the ceiling in this throne room. It looks like stars. It's all tessellations, but it looks like a night sky. It's beautiful. I've actually been there and I've stood in that space. It is gorgeous. So Escher went there, inspired by there. It's like, yes, I'm going to go home. I'm going to do this. I'm going to make tessellations. But instead of just copying what they were doing, he decided to add his own flair to it. Now, I also want to reinforce that he did not really understand the math behind what he was doing. He was just inspired by the geometric shapes. He also did some work with paradox images and impossible figures. I want to just side note that right now. So this is called the convex concave. This is one of his lithographs. Now here's what's interesting. He drew this onto a piece of lithograph, or he drew it out with a crayon, and then he covers it with ink, and he then presses that drawing onto a piece of paper with that ink, and then the ink transfers onto the paper. That's what we're seeing. We're seeing that print. So I'm going to trip with your mind. I'm hoping you're really focused in on this with me. Okay, so you see the guy sitting on the ground, and right next to him looks like a little pool, like, hold some water, and then just beyond that to the right are some stairs, and then to the left are some stairs, and then there's a woman standing up there with a basket, right? All makes sense. You come back down the stairs, you see a little pot of plant, a potted plant in a window, and then you go back up those other set of stairs, and there's a guy with a trumpet. But that window doesn't make sense because the angle's wrong. But unless you focus on that guy with the trumpet, and instead of it being a window on the right side of a wall, it's on the left side of a wall, and the stairs are no longer stairs, they're the ceiling underneath him. And then as you come back down the stairs, you see a potted plant or a vase hanging from the ceiling underneath. And that pool, that was a pool, is now a domed, like, ceiling fixture. Did it trip on you? I hope it did. I hope it flipped on you. And then you look at the little geckos, the little lizards at the bottom. The one on the left looked like he's climbing up onto a flight of stairs, but the one on the right looks like he's climbing on the ceiling under some stairs. This will trip your mind for quite some time if you just really look at it and it'll mess with you all day long. But I want to move on. Okay, so Escher was fascinated with every kind of tessellation. He actually wrote essays on tessellations. And mathematicians have read these and gone, wow, this guy's really smart. Unfortunately, he didn't understand the math behind it, and he had to have mathematicians explain it to him. So he would start with a basic shape, and then he'd build his tessellation from that. Okay, so he would distort the basic shape and change it into an animal or a bird or other figure, and the effect was startling and beautiful. So as we can see here, he's cut this basic square into a Pegasus, and then he repeats that shape, and they all interlock with each other until the whole paper is filled. And this could go on and cover the whole Earth, wrapping around the Earth and connecting back to itself.